no matter what, when it comes to holding your seed words, there's pros and cons to everything I'm saying. There's pros and cons to everything you would say. There's pros and cons to everything the leading experts would say, like, because it's preference, right? It's really all about that. But if you did want to bury it underground, I worked with a metal, like a professional metal detector, and he was saying to bury it like straight down like this. This way, the 2 millimeter most narrow part is harder to read with a metal detector or find. So in that case, you would have to remember exactly where you buried it because you're going to have trouble trying to find it with a metal detector, right? Another tip that he had given was when you are burying it underground, say you bury 4 feet underground and you drop the plate in 4 feet in the ground, then you fill in maybe a foot of dirt, right? Now that you have your plate with some dirt, you put in some like an old bolt or a nail or something, right? And then you put more dirt in. Then you put like an old coffee can in, right? And the reason you're doing this is because if you feel that an adversary was ever trying to look for your seed words or your seed plate buried underground, they would then be discouraged as they're digging underneath and be like, oh, it's just an old coffee can.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm here with James, which is VP at Stampseed. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Mauricio. Having a good morning so far. Happy to be here with you to chat today. How about you?
Yeah, same. It was so nice to meeting you in Nashville. So we've been keeping in touch ever since. And if you don't mind, can you give us an intro and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I've had various jobs throughout my life. And about 2017, I started working in the digital space, digital marketing, running PPC ads, email marketing, social media, back end web stuff, you name it. And in doing that, one of the companies that I was helping promote their products, we've noticed that seed phrase storage was a term that people were searching for, and they were purchasing our tools like our hammers and our stamps and our anvils to stamp that out. And me being a Bitcoiner, was like, okay, it was a little bit early in my Bitcoin journey. It was about like 2019. So I didn't really understand what cold storage was. I didn't understand what seed words were, but we saw in the search terms Bitcoin seed phrase, Bitcoin metal plates, seed plate, hammer for stamping seed words, stamps for stamping seed words, things like that. And that's literally what people are searching, and then our products are coming up for them because there's phrases in those terms where our products, are targeting. What was interesting is like you see a lot of terms, you see hundreds of rows of different terms people are searching, but these ones had sales tied to them. So anytime something converts and leads to a sale, you want to figure out why that's happening, and you want to optimize your web listing to make sure it's looking best, add pictures, add videos, things like that. But it's something we couldn't really do with that product line because it was marketed towards a totally different demographic. So we can't just add Bitcoin terminology and seed phrase terminology to these tools because it wouldn't make sense to you can't try to please everybody, right, with that listing. So that was one issue right there. So what we ended up doing, and also the products we were selling were all kind of a la carte, where you had to piece everything together to make a kit. So I decided, okay, we can't do anything to this actual listing that's working. How do we make something new? So we literally started testing putting together a seed phrase storage kit using some of our tools that we had in the warehouse, some overstock items that people weren't really interested anymore, but Bitcoiners wanted because these were the plain products that they needed to do what they had to do with very clear, legible letters, nothing fancy. They wanted to make sure everything was as clear and legit as possible. So we put together a listing. It took a couple weeks to see some sales generate from the listing. It was a kit. We put together all our tools, a plate, everything someone needs to hammer their seed birds into metal to make them fireproof. And then we started seeing some sales from that, which was crazy. So, looking through search terms, finding a little needle in a haystack almost, seed phrase storage plate with a sale tied to it, turned that into stamp seed ultimately. And it's been kind of a crazy ride ever since. But that is an interesting story for me because as I mentioned before, like prior to all that, like I was into Bitcoin, more of a crypto person though, altcoins and whatnot. It wasn't just Bitcoin only for me at the time. I didn't get it because prior to Stampseed or the birth of Stampseed, I was more of a day trader, and I just look at crypto as another form of a stock, another way to day trade. I didn't really understand anything about it. It was just like, okay, how do I get rich quick doing this? I have to save for a car, engagement ring for my wife, or saving for a house. Short time preference. Get as much as you can, as fast as you can. what's the next thing? And to me, Bitcoin was something that already was a thing, right? Like I looked at it always as like the MySpace of social media, right? The first one isn't going to be the best one. It's going to be the next thing. It's going to be Facebook that comes along, right? It's always the next thing. And I feel like that's what I was chasing. I think that's what everyone's always chasing at the time, right? Bitcoin came, it's went to 17,000 at that time. It was about 2017 when I first heard about it. I was like, okay, I missed that boat. What other coins are out there, right? So a typical journey that you're going through, kind of, you know, coiner, altcoiner, lost a lot of money, learned a lot, didn't learn a lot, made mistakes over and over. And what was interesting is about 2019, it might have been actually like late 2018, when I first started seeing these terms that I was mentioning before coming up. It opened up a totally different way of thinking and application for me, because prior to that, it was all about how do I get rich quick, right? Like, how do I get rich off of crypto? Like, what other coins are out there? How do I day trade this? And then when I'm seeing things like Bitcoin seed word plate convert, I have no idea what seed plate is, right? I didn't know what cold storage was. So now I'm like, okay, I have to figure out why this is working and how to make it even better for the company. Like, how can we build this into something? So I had to research it. I had to research what cold storage was. I had to understand what all these things were, why they're important, why you're putting it on metal. So it was kind of like an interesting way to kind of like my Bitcoin journey like started on one end, and then like I'm working from like my job on another end, and it kind of just met in the middle, right? Like that crypto journey, that Stampsy journey, and it met here, and like the Bitcoin journey kind of started. So it was really interesting because I think it probably sped up my interest to learn about like those more like highly technical aspects of it, and it pretty much helped me understand what Bitcoin was at a totally different level. Truly decentralized, scarce, revolution in money. You could be your own bank. You could have no third party involved. You could have complete control over your wealth, and that was extremely powerful to me. So it just led me on a path to want to learn more and digest more about Bitcoin. Quickly tried to read as much as I possibly could on it, which is a fool's errand because there's so many good books coming out where it's hard to really, read every one of them. Listening to as many podcasts as I can, going to conferences around the world and in the States here too, and just meeting people and learning as much as possible. And it was interesting because like we were able to kind of position Stampseed as like a Bitcoin focused company. Like we want to spread that Bitcoin message out. And I feel like from what we're providing, it's really like the ultimate form of financial freedom, right? Like you're stamping your seed words to your entire generational wealth into a titanium plate because you're the only one in control of it. So that's pretty much my journey most recently. Like I said, I had a lot of odd jobs throughout the years and always had a knack for excelling at whatever area I worked at, whatever random thing it was. I felt like I was almost like a master of none. And then I was able to kind of figure out a way to create a business model with Samseed and then just learn a lot about Bitcoin along the way and align those two things together. So it's been awesome, man.
There is so much goodness to unpack here because one of the things that people ask me all the time is like, what does it mean self-custody? Because the Bitcoin network is the most secure network on the planet, but if you store your coins in your hands, as I think you should, no financial advice, then we are the weak link. Because if you just write a bunch of seed phrase on a piece of paper, even if nothing happens, no flooding, no fire, a paper through time, it's not the best, let's say, place to hold your seed phrase, which is the thing that you should protect with your life. Because if someone has access to it, they can wipe you off. So seeing a product like yours is like, okay, that's pretty cool because you can stamp literally into metal, which is fire resistant, water resistant, and all sorts of things. So it becomes extremely attractive. Before we dive into the product itself, which is fantastic because it comes as a kit, you have a little hammer, which is super cool. And I tested it in Nashville. I remember printing and you were saying, hey, hammer it as as your life depends on it. I wanted to ask you, do you have tips for people, let's say for someone who purchases your kit? So what are the steps after they stamped on metal? Where do you think they should store the plate itself?
I'll preface it by kind of saying, no matter what you're recording your seed words on, you're always going to have the predicament of where do I store this, right? And that's like the number one question we get when we're live in person at conferences, like, where do I store this? And it's kind of a tough one because, like, as you alluded to, like, you don't want to tell people where you're storing it or what your good ideas are because then it's becomes more of a thing where these things start to concentrate to the same five areas that people are storing it, and then everyone knows where to look 20, 30 years from now. When it becomes like more of a mainstream thing, like everyone's got a seat plate. So some tips I would have though, one with our plate. I have one right here. Like for anyone who isn't familiar, it's a solid piece of metal, and like you can see up top there, like the words are stamped in it. So it's titanium. It's never going to rust, corrode, meaning it's waterproof, right? So one thing you could do, which I'm actually a big fan of, is bury it. If you have property, you could bury it underground. You don't have to put it inside anything. You could literally just bury it straight underground like this. And with doing stuff like that, there's some tips that you could have, because no matter what, when it comes to holding your C words, there's pros and cons to everything I'm saying. There's pros and cons to everything you would say. There's pros and cons to everything the leading experts would say, like, because it's preference, right? It's really all about that. But if you did want to bury it underground, I worked with a metal, like a professional metal detector, and he was saying to bury it like straight down like this. This way, the 2 millimeter most narrow part is harder to read with a metal detector or find. So in that case, you would have to remember exactly where you buried it, because you're going to have trouble trying to find it with a metal detector, right? Another tip that he had given was when you are burying it underground, say you bury 4 feet underground and you drop the plate in 4 feet in the ground, then you fill in maybe a foot of dirt, right? Now that you have your plate with some dirt, you put in some like an old bolt or a nail or something, right? And then you put more dirt in. Then you put like an old coffee can in, right? And the reason you're doing this is because if you feel that an adversary was ever trying to look for your seed words or your seed plate buried underground, they would then be discouraged as they're digging underneath and be like, oh, it's just an old coffee can. By the time they got to the seed plate, they probably have trouble scanning, because one, titanium is harder to pick up with a metal detector. Two, if you're burying it with that, they would have to hit that 2 millimeter area basically, which is very easy to go over. And then another key point is that if you're looking for it, when you hit the coffee can, to keep digging down, that that's where it is, right? Some other tips, like you have four holes here on the back side of the plate, so you could use those holes. They're a quarter-inch standard size. You could mount the plate into a wall, put it in a wall, put a pitcher in front of it, mount it, under a table, mount it onto the top of the safe. Those utility holes, you could put it anywhere. Go in your attic and mount it to the indoor cover of your attic air handler for your HVAC system. There's really a lot of different places you could hide it, right? So it's really a matter of, where do you think no one's going to look, and where are you going to remember it is, right? And then, does anyone else know it's there? Say you die, you get hit on the head, you forget what your C dirt words are. Like, is anyone else going to know where those are, right? Kind of comes to inheritance planning at that point, which kind of leads to like the next level of, where do I hide it, which is less of a James Bond level of hiding things. Because if you are worried about single sig, or worried about losing one plate, or worried about inheritance, like who's going to get the plate, you could do multi sig, and you could use these plates for multi sig too. You could do triple S, the Shamir shard secret sharing, where you would have up to 16 shares of your seed words and a threshold to unlock them. And you could kind of geographically disperse those plates, different areas. All the eggs aren't in one basket in those situations, right? And we also have the 2 of 3 poor man's multi-sig sharding method, where you could split your 24 words. Instead of having them all on one plate, they'd be split on 3 plates, and there would be some crossover between those plates, so that any 2 plates have all the words, and any one plate doesn't have all the words. And it's not enough words to brute force if somebody found one. So we have that. That's called the 2 3 sharding. And in that case, maybe you put one at your house, maybe you put one in your vacation house, maybe one at the bank, maybe one with the family lawyer, one with a trusted friend or something. I don't know. There's different ways you could kind of shard that out. So when it comes to hiding it, be very creative, right? And you might be the only one that ever knows it's there. And if that's a concern for yourself, there are some other methods you could go, like I just mentioned, to kind of disperse it out and be a little different. And then another big one is a safe. Like everyone says, oh, I don't need stamp seed, because I'd write it on paper and I put my paper in a safe, or a safety deposit box, which I don't like safety deposit boxes at all, right? We're being our own bank. I'm not trusting the bank with my bank, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to have them hold it. So, with that being the case, we'll talk about a safe at a house. You have a safe at your house. Okay, you wrote it on paper and you put the paper in your safe. Okay, well, someone that doesn't even know anything about Bitcoin or seed words knows what a safe is and knows there's probably something valuable in there, right? So you're basically advertising that there's something in there that someone should look for, right? They're not going to dig a hole in your backyard looking for anything. They're not going to look for a treasure chest in your backyard. They're going to go in your house and look for the safe that's inside. So I don't like that because it's just an easy target to me. And also with that, like paper in a safe isn't always fireproof. You have to have a very high quality safe. You have to be 100% sure that paper's not going to char, burn, anything's going to degrade or break down on it. And I saw with the LA fires, there was a picture of a safe that was charring, in those fires for a few days. And they opened up the safe and all the paper inside was like charred up and burnt. And not all safes are fireproof. And like if you just go buy a safe off Amazon or go to like a wholesale store or something like that, you're gonna say if you're not going to get something that's robust and meant to be fireproof for over a course of 2 days or 3 days or something like that. So I tend to not trust that for those two reasons. It doesn't make sense to me. But I have spoken with people who they like using these holes to like mount it in their safe and then put like a fake covering over it or something like that, like a magnet. There's so many different ways you could do it, really. But that's my thing. When it comes to hiding it, the things I'm saying might make a lot of sense to people. They might agree with them. People might also think they're terrible ideas and have their own ideas. And it just all comes down to preference. What are you most comfortable with? And, as life evolves, your plan for hiding things changes, right? Like, okay, this Bitcoin has become worth significantly more at this point, right? I don't feel comfortable burying it in my backyard on a plate. And then you could explore, other sort of institutional, collaborative custody or something like that. So, yeah, those tips right there.
I also agree with you. I think you said it spot on. Be creative, right? So first of all, I would not recommend to anyone to store the entire Bitcoin pot in one wallet because that's a massive point of failure. And get creative. For example, you could have fake ones that you place in strategic points to, I don't know, make the thief believe they found it and they will leave you alone, right? So as long as it works for you, be creative is probably the best advice. I agree.
Have more than one backup, like you mentioned. Like, I don't agree with memorizing as a sole backup, but memorize as a second backup. It doesn't hurt to have that. And as you mentioned, having multiple wallets makes sense. Like, I have some older wallets that I don't trust the security of, but I kept a few dollars on there just to have like, so, and I guess you could also do a passphrase too, right? You could have that separate account within an account. You're going to be your own bank. You have to make sure you're setting up your bank and your fortress the way that you're most comfortable with, the way that you're not going to lose your Bitcoin with too. And that's kind of like, there's some trade-offs looking one way or the other. And as time goes on, right, and more people are aware of what Bitcoin is and that you have Bitcoin, maybe, your plan could change so over time. But for me, like I live in New York right now, and there's not many Bitcoiners around, believe it or not. Like at least unless like no one's really mentioning it, like I feel like I'm alone here. There's not many Bitcoiners. It's not like something that anyone really knows what. No one really knows what a hardware wallet that I talk with is. But as time goes on, these are going to be normal things that people are very aware of.
There is the $5 wrench attack that someone can come with a hammer in my house. But I mean, I got nothing here. There's nothing I know. Like I built a system in which you need multiple people at the same time to open the vault, so-called, right? So you have to design depending on, if you're public, if you're popular, if you want to stay quiet. There's so many options. But this is the beauty of Bitcoin. You become the bank if you wish to go down the self-custody route. Otherwise, you can purchase an ETF. You can work with companies. They allow you to have multi-sig. They will store in their vaults your Bitcoin. For me, one of the most beautiful thing is being creative and designing my own system. But at the same time, we become the weakest point because if something happens to me and quote my plan, well, what my wife is going to do, you have to think about redundancy also in that case. Whatever it is, I don't think jumping into self-custody from the get-go is a good idea. I think starting with an exchange, maybe a small amount, it could be a warming up situation, maybe an ETF. And then with time, you can study, you can learn, you can test. When you feel comfortable, then you take the step and you get your own custody. Because I don't know if you agree with me, but it's a big deal, man. Having your entire wealth in your hands, it's a big thing.
Yeah, and you don't want to be the reason that it went away, right? Like you're smart enough to buy Bitcoin, put it in self custody, and then you didn't go through the process as meticulously as possible, then you lost it. Like that's scary. And it led me to one other tip that I like to tell people who aren't in self custody yet. As you mentioned, start out on the exchange, right? Like if you're just getting into Bitcoin for the first time and you only have maybe a lower amount, it doesn't make sense to invest in a hardware wallet, to invest in a stamp seed at that point, because it might be more investment than your actual stack is, right? So wait till it's an amount that makes sense to invest in the $200 high quality open source Bitcoin only hardware wallet, and for the $200 stamp seed set for titanium, right? Like justify the need to buy things like that. And then when you do move into self custody, once you have that hardware wallet, what I always like to tell people is start by sending a very small amount to that wallet. Send $20, right? Make sure it works. Familiarize yourself with the process. You won't feel the stress sending, a huge number for the first time. Like, why would you want to do that? Send a little bit, get your feet wet. And then once you send it to that wallet, record your seed words, of course, have those written down because that's your backup, and then wipe that wallet out and then restore it again with those words and make sure that money is still there. You're going through these processes, you're going through these motions, familiarizing yourself with it. And I feel like you're eliminating the level of stress out because $20 is on the line versus, 50,000. You're eliminating that stress, which eliminates the possibility to mess up along the way, right? Like when you're stressed out, you're not thinking straight, you write something down wrong, and then bang, you can't get back into your wallet. So start like that. And then once it's wiped, okay, you practice that entire process of recovery. So in case, 20, 30 years from now, after you lost your wallet or it got destroyed, you remember back and you're like, oh, I've done this before. It's very easy. I just put my seed words on here and then bang, bang, send, done. So that's something I like to tell people too. It's, I do it all the time myself. I dollar cost average and I send them to my wallet, once every few months, sometimes once a month. It really depends. But every time I do it, I'm like, let me just send a small amount first. It's ritual for me at this point.
This is probably one of the best advice ever. You want to make sure to check that funds are getting in. It's difficult to have a plan that works for everyone because otherwise, if we had such a thing, well, then it would be very vulnerable, right? So that's the beauty, but at the same time, the ugly part of Bitcoin, because you become the weakest link because the network is going to go. Bitcoin is going to be mined. The nodes are going to be up, but you, on the other hand, can be the failure point. So I think having a plan is everything. And you can find in the description a code, which is Mr. M15 to enjoy 15% off. Thank you, James and Stampseed for the discount.
If you want complete full sole control over your wealth and, have it 50, 60 years from now or beyond to pass down, single sig or some sort of multi-sig collaborative custody with, where you have the most amount of plates makes the most sense to me. And yeah, keeping it on the exchange, you do want to take self custody, right? Keeping it on the exchange is a bad thing. Paper Bitcoin is not a good thing. Rehypothecation of Bitcoin is not a good thing. So self custody is good because it keeps Bitcoin supply cap true. It can't be manipulated like exchange usually can. And a good thing is, like, once people put their Bitcoin in cold storage, like I forget what the exact number is, but most Bitcoin in cold storage like hasn't moved in the past year. So once you have it there, like say you're getting into Bitcoin for the first time, you believe in it, but you're unsure. Once you move into cold storage, like that's almost it. Like you're in at that point. Like it's hard to move back to the exchange to sell it again, and do that timely. But once it's in cold storage, my mentality changed completely, and I just immediately switch, like this is my long-term savings, right? I can earn much more in savings with this. My hard-earned money from the efforts I put into the world are held in something that's not going to become debased, and it's just my savings. Like it's like I forget about it, right? I don't forget about my words, but I forget about the fact that that's money that I could use right now. I look at that as, I'm using this, maybe 30, 40 years from now.
Controversial thoughts, maybe you agree with me. This is why gold is working so well, because you have to exchange into gold. And then, I mean, if you do own gold yourself, if you have self-custody of gold, then you have a break of gold in your home and you can't panic sell it with 20x
Right.
leverage on a random exchange on a Tuesday night. So you have to find
Yeah.
someone who's going to get it and exchange it back into fiat. There's going to be a commission attached to it. So I think it makes sense. Whatever you put into a cold storage, into a hardware wallet, becomes untouchable. I mean, especially if you have a process, you have to go through it and find a phrase and dig out something from the soil. And it reminds me of like the pirate maps for the treasure. You have to follow, count the steps to the palm tree on an island and then dig.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It can be, right? It certainly can, especially when you're thinking like Bitcoin forces you to think, 50 years into the future, maybe less, maybe 30 for some. So does cold storage. Like when you're storing it on something like titanium, you're thinking so far into the future, like you're thinking about your kids getting it. That's kind of what I'm at. Like the sats I'm buying today, I'm probably never going to use. Like I really probably will never touch them again once they're in cold storage. Someone lucky down the line probably will. So yeah, it forces you to think long term and kind of play out all these little scenarios in mind, what could happen. And one of the biggest scenarios to play out is what could this be worth? If I bought my stack, I'm not buying Bitcoin anymore. What could this be worth one day, right? And I think NVK said it like 10x whatever you hold in Bitcoin, right? So if you have, $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and it's on paper and you're not too worried if it's on paper because it's only 1,000 you're losing, imagine that being 10,000. Or if it's 10,000, imagine it being 100,000. Like always think far in the future and what the value of Bitcoin can be. And make sure you're just set up for that and have, your process nailed down perfectly. If you made an intricate process to back up your seed words in like a collaborative self-custody way, but you don't like the medium that you recorded your seed words on, that's a problem. Now you have to go back and fix that. So always think like into the future, like where's Bitcoin going to be, and what do I want my setup to be when that's the case. And another thing too, like you mentioned before, like different wallets, it's great to have. Like I have a ton of wallets I just kind of play around with at this point too. But a hot wallet, I'm sure a lot of people listening have, right? Like that's good. That's for like your everyday spending. That's your wallet that you carry around with your couple $100 in for regular things. It should never touch your cold storage wallet. Like you should have two totally different setups. For me, I live in New York, so I don't really have a hot wallet. I can't do things like that because pretty much everything is shut down here except for Aqua. And that takes a little bit of time to work with. So yeah, have your hot wallet with your couple $100 for everyday spending. Don't use your cold storage wallet to buy something for $10 with Bitcoin. Like, do not touch that wallet with anything. Like that to me, that should only have money sent from the exchange or from another wallet that's untouched to that wallet, and then sent out somewhere else the same way when you plan to use it again. So yeah. And with those hot wallet seed words, they're in the phone already. Some of them prompt you to store them into your cloud. I'm sure some people screenshot it, take pictures with their notes. That's completely vulnerable. Like that is not cold storage at all. So a lot of people have the wallet. It's not the same. You need a hardware wallet. Looks like a little USB flash drive or a calculator, and then you're in business.
You don't want to touch them. That's why you want to save into it. So I completely agree.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. So have a long-term wallet you do not touch. Some friends of mine also recommended to buy a Trezor or whatever you might be, transfer the funds and smash with a hammer and burn it. That's it. So you don't even have the device. Of course, you have to save the words.
You could do that. You could definitely do that if you don't plan on sending to that wallet anytime soon, right? But you could destroy it. You could have your seed words, and then the good thing is you had a Trezor. You could go get a foundation or a cold card or a jade or anything like that, and restore it with those same seed words. So those words are universal, right? They're not tied to the wallet manufacturer at all. They're BIP39 protocol that are tied to Bitcoin, right? So you don't have to buy the same exact wallet. It could be 50 years from now. Who knows what these wallets are going to be, right? Like these could be pretty advanced high tech, but they're still going to take probably those 12 to 24 words, and then everything's there, right? You smash that Trezor with that hammer back in the day, and then you hammered your seed words into the plate, and you buy a new plate 50 years from now and spin it back up again, and it's all there, which is amazing. It's just fascinating to think that you have that complete control and power. It really is pretty. There's nothing like it, right? There's nothing in the world that's like that. I feel so. It's the most scarce thing that there is, and you definitely don't want to lose it. So, take it seriously, right? A lot of
Yep.
people think hammering their words into metal is a little crazy, right? Like, when we see people at conferences, like, wait, do you guys do it for us? That's crazy. Wait, we do it. That seems a little crazy. Why would we do that? But I always say it's like proof of work. Like you need to hammer your words in there to make sure it's good and it's going to last. So yeah, you got to go through those motions if you want to be your own bank and have true self custody. It's what it comes down to, and it's fun to do too. Relieve some stress, and it is pretty cool. I feel like a modern day blacksmith hammering my generational wealth into a titanium plate. It's pretty wild.
Sometimes people also misunderstand that when you transfer Bitcoin into a hardware wallet, the hardware wallet itself does not have the Bitcoins. The Bitcoins are going into a network, which means you can even destroy the hardware wallet itself. People think it's in the USB thing, It's like, oh, I
No,
lost the
yeah,
USB
no.
thing, I lost all the Bitcoin. No, 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 no.
It's in your seed words, really, right? It's in your seed words because like all that wallet's doing is it's storing your private key and using that key to unlock to send a transaction out. So it's that's why once you get your key and you generate it, you could self generate it or you could use the wallet to generate the key. But that is universal, right? It's tied to the Bitcoin blockchain. You can take that anywhere with you. It has nothing to do with the wallet itself. So yeah, that's funny. Like a lot of people think you're sending the Bitcoins. They're not even coins, right? They're not even real coins, right? And people think they're sending them. They're bits of information. People think they're coins. They think they're sending to a wallet. The wallet's not a wallet. It's really a private key. But it's just like easier ways to kind of remember what this stuff is. But ultimately, it's your private key, right? And if you don't have access to that private key, chances are it's because it's on the exchange and someone else does. If it's on Coinbase, chances are it's Brian Armstrong's private key, and he's not going to really tell you what it is unless you have a Coinbase hot wallet. If it's just on the exchange, it's not really yours, right? It's theirs, and who knows what they're doing with it and if they have it.
If there are companies they want to stamp your seed phrase for you, well, don't do
No,
that.
no,
Because
dude, that's so bad. We
yeah.
saw someone posted on Twitter. There was a service on Etsy that was
Oh
doing
my
that.
God.
They were actually stamping people's seed words, where you just like you were getting a piece of jewelry personalized for your significant other, right? Just like, oh, here's the personalization section. Send me your seed words. Terrible. I mean, horrible, horrible idea. But it happens because people don't understand what this technology is. They don't understand how powerful it is, and there's also way too much trust out there. There's a ton of scammers, and it's going to get worse and worse. It was a struggle for us in the beginning. Everyone thought we were a service, and we're like, oh my god, no, we're not. We're not a service. But like for those people, I was like, oh, they're so early in their journey. They're not even ready for like self custody yet, probably.
Another super bad idea connected to the Etsy is buying other wallet on Amazon. Don't purchase anything on Amazon, because what happens is people can buy the product, put some malware, and then sell it. Only buy from legit sources. Check that all the leads are in place, because if you buy, it's like you cannot buy a second-hand out of a wallet, man. That's like, no, that's not safe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a risk, right? Like, what could happen in transit with that wallet, right? Can the shipping company do anything with it, even like? But there are certain wallets that you could buy that I feel much more comfortable with. Some people can build their own wallets. If you're creating your own seed words, and you're setting the wallet up from scratch, you could usually tell when you're getting something legit. But Amazon is risky. I wouldn't trust doing it on there at all. Back in the day, people would recommend it just because it was like encrypted, but it's not worth the risk. It could also be compromised, that device. And yeah, you don't want to store your seed words on anything electronic, like we were saying before. Like there are computers that never sleep, that look day and night for those 12 to 24 words. It's much easier to hack into your email address to find where you sent your email to yourself with those words. So as time goes on, it's just there's so much money behind finding seed words, right? This just don't store it online, right? Keep it completely on a physical medium.
I'm sure you agree with me. Bitcoin is going up only from here. Okay, there is going to correct over time, of course. It's not going to be a straight line, but in 10, 20 years, I strongly believe we will be way above 100,000. So whatever, like you said so well in the beginning, whatever you do now, think about 10, 100x from the starting point. So whatever might be insignificant, like the 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas, maybe in 20 years from now could buy you a mansion, So be mindful also of this. It goes up over time. So you want to make sure that whenever you decide to go into self-custody, you have to study it. You have to make sure you know the process, you have a plan. Otherwise, it's a recipe for a disaster, right? So
Yeah, 100%, man.
fantastic, James. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely epic having you on the show. You shared so many good things. So hopefully you guys are taking notes.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, man. And don't forget about that code if you guys want to get 15% off Stamp Seed. I'm sure you have it somewhere on there. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. We sell the whole kit, right? You get everything you need to stamp it into that metal plate. You have all the tools. And if you ever get a new wallet one day, or if you have other people in your life that you want to help out with self custody, you just have to buy another plate. So that's the unique thing about us. You just get your kit and you have your tools for life. So it's pretty cool. If you have any questions, feel free to DM us. And yeah, it's great to have a talk with you today, Mauricio. And yeah, be well.
Fantastic. Yeah, of course, in the description, I will link your social media and your website, and of course, the Mr. M15 for a 50% discount. And what I recommend to do is go and get yourself a kit. And when you see a 15% drop, you just stamp the heck out of it.
Exactly. 100%.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you again, James. I'll speak to you soon, okay?
All right, no problem. Have a good one.
You too. Cheers.